Hello everyone, my name is Asterisks, and today I'm going to be your guide to the terrifying world of Junji Ito. To better understand Junji Ito's work, one has to understand the difference between American horror and Japanese horror. American horror kind of dives more into the classic slasher films, a bunch of horny teenagers go off to a cabin in the woods and we're just anticipating the killer to get to them one by one and see who's the last person standing. Only to have them killed off, of course. Then we have Japanese horror, which finds a way to work its way around everyday occurrences and manifests itself in a way where ordinary objects and mundane tasks can become horrifying. Something that will stick with you psychologically, something to haunt you when you're alone at night, or alone in the dark, or even in a crowd full room. There is something about Japanese horror that really sticks out amongst other cultures. For instance, Junji Ito. He will find ways to make you second guess and overanalyze the simplest and most mundane thing you can think of. And it will find a way to haunt you when you least expect it. Junji Ito's work has been a favorite of mine for a couple of years, and for a lot of reasons. His work has spanned well over 200 stories and still going. Now, this list in particular is what makes it important to me is that I'm only going to be counting down my top 5 finished series. For those of you who already know who Junji is and have read or may have heard of his story of the series Tomi, I am excluding that from my list for the one reason that I haven't finished it. I'm sorry, it's really hard to come across the entire series fully fan translated. But then again, 'tis the season to be spoopy, so let's go ahead and get into this in my top 5 favorite Junji Ito stories. Number 5. So originally, when I was doing this list, I was not expecting this to be in my top 5. Maybe in the top 10, perhaps. But nonetheless, this one is definitely one of Junji's more renowned stories. Gyo, or pronounced Gyo, it is the story of what happens when Mother Nature manifests itself with technology to create something that is almost a missing link to the next step in evolution. And that right there is terrifying, that the entire human race is on the brink of extinction, all because of some sort of manifestation that was both an act of nature while combining itself with something that us as human society have created and forgotten. Maybe I'm just nitpicking here, but it does start off a little slow, but it gradually starts to go from incredibly terrifying to silly and finally just what the fuck. And I feel that that's a recurring issue of Junji's work. He finds a way to come up with these original concepts that make you rethink the way that you know the world around you, and then they kind of just go crazy from there. And you'll kind of see that in a lot of his works. This is definitely one story I have to recommend, especially since they made an anime adaptation of it, though the gender roles were definitely switched. But definitely check out Gaio when you have the chance. Number 4. Hellstar Romina. This one is oftentimes kind of brushed off and not necessarily looked at quite often. This is easily a story that can be brushed over or just put to the side, but until you actually get into the logistics and the psychology of it, it is by far a story that I can't help but come back to time and time over and over. The story begins with a scientist who ends up discovering an entirely new planet, and he names it after his daughter, Romina. It slowly starts making its way to our planet, and as it's slowly coming closer and closer, it is impending doom, because at this point, not only do people love this planet, this new thing that was recently discovered, it's also put the girl, Romina, on a metaphorical pedestal. She's a star. She is now well known around the world as a celebrity. Because of this, that just makes her a bad target when something bad happens to the planet. So, There's this crazy cult that gets involved. There's overly obsessive fanboys that love her to death to the point they're willing to kill each other. Even this actually sounds a lot like Tomy. So, what ends up happening is Junji has a tendency to make his stories interesting and then derail it to where it gets a little goofy at the end. So the second half of the story, we get these people who are just jumping off buildings and flying and zooming across the planet, and it's just weird. I don't know how else to describe it. House of Romina is definitely one of those stories where you just have to keep reading to see what happens next, because to be honest, I had no idea where the story was going to go. And that's always a good thing. At times. Number 3. Undying Love had to have been on my top 5. Just without me even going back to rereading some of the works. This was the one story I refused to reread from beginning to end. Just because out of all of Junji's work, this was hands down his scariest. This one gave me nightmares. If you're looking for a really good scare, this is your best option. In my top 5 list, this is by far his scariest. The story begins in a small prefecture outside of Tokyo, in which there's this little urban legend that's been going around the entire city called the fortune-telling game. The fortune-telling game begins when you stand right at the edge of the alley, wait for a bystander to pass you, and ask them, "Will you tell me my fortune?" In which you look down, never make eye contact, and you ask fortune from them. And it could be either something good or bad. This seemed originally as a harmless little game, until we find that there's this mysterious handsome boy that lingers around in the fog. This definitely goes into Silent Hill territory when you start to realize that this boy, no one knows what his name is or where he came from, but everyone starts putting together that every woman that's came into contact with him ends up dying. As far as the art style goes in this one, Junji goes out of his way to really even go outside the panel lines to create the fog effects, and I thought that was a nice little touch on his part. We get some very intensive, psychologically disturbed characters. A woman who can never say no to anything ends up in full head-to-toe tattoos. And there's a lot more interesting mind games that come out of this book, and I can't help but recommend, if you're looking for a good scare, Undying Love is the place to go. Number 2. Number 2 was kind of not an easy decision for me. At some point in your lives, you probably encountered a child from hell. Not literally, but maybe literally. Depends on your definition. But my number 2 pick has to go to Shuichi's Diary. Shuichi is this little shit, an abomination spawned from hell. It starts off with this one innocent family. So just imagine you going to visit your relatives on the other side of the country for the summer. Everything's just fine, you know? Then you meet your younger cousin, Shuichi, and this kid has hobbies that include him strapping candles to his forehead, sucking on rusty nails, and making voodoo dolls of the people he knows, just so he can fuck with them. So, Shuichi is a spoiled little brat who, if he doesn't get his way, he will use the powers of dark arts to his favor. In which the teacher in Shuichi's school tries to private tutor him, ends up getting his soul sucked out and being put into a mannequin of the actual teacher. Shuichi does get his just desserts from time to time. There are times where he likes to exaggerate and compensate for his lack of dark arts. But then there are times he'll take you by surprise on what he can really do. Number 1. I'm sorry, but again, I'm not really sorry at all. My number 1 pick has to go to his most notable work of all time, and it's probably one of the few works that's actually been published here in the States, is Uzumaki. Uzumaki is a 3-volume manga, which you can actually buy the omnibus version here in the States nowadays, so all 3 volumes into one. This one had to have been, by far, a lot of twists and turns. I can't even tell you. I guess the best way I can describe it is, Uzumaki translates to vortex or spiral. And with that in mind, all the chapters throughout the entire series centered around a spiral as an omen. Whenever there's a spiral involved within the storyline, that is a sign of bad things are sure to happen. Now, I actually want to make a full video of me going into detail all the chapters or my top 5 stories from this one, and I'll do that another time. For now, I just want to give a basic analysis of what to expect in Uzumaki. We have a whole chapter devoted to people turning into snails, a chapter where people are obsessed with a particular lighthouse and its rays could easily kill you. The umbilical cord. I'm not even going near that. Just the idea of a chapter involving umbilical cords and infants. That is probably one of the sickest things I've ever read out of Junji by far. Interesting to see how the story actually wraps up and goes, in what directions it goes in. This story easily made me question my take on the pattern itself, and his attention to detail again really just stands out the most. I can't help but recommend this one by far more than anything else on this list. And so there you have it, guys. That was my top 5. And there you have it, guys. That was my top 5 list of my favorite series from Junji Ito. I will be working on even more stories and maybe a few more synopses of his other works in time. Until then, my name is Asterisks. Please feel free to subscribe.